So we will be hearing from 4 speakers today. We will be hearing from Fadi, co-founder at Bridge Athletic. We'll be hearing from Anthony Darmiento from Golden State Warriors, Gaga Caserta from Kansas City Current, and Matthew Banks from 292 Performance. So it's great to have all of you joining us today. Thank you so much for your time. Now, as many of you will know, working across the world in elite sport, it can be really hard to find the balance with the demands that are on athletes. So in today's webinar, what we're going to be doing is delving into how teams such as the Golden State Warriors, Kansas City Current, and 292 Performance are utilizing technology and data to get the best practice from their athletes. And we will also be hearing from the perspective of Fadi from Bridge Athletic and how they are working in collaboration with elite sporting teams to really help drive success in this area. So without further ado, let's begin with talking to Anthony from Golden State Warriors. Anthony, I know it's been a busy week, so it's great to have you with us. So let's just start with, from a best practice perspective, is there anything the performance team at Golden State Warriors have implemented that you personally feel has really helped drive success during your time there?
Yeah, I think I've been with the Warriors now for 5 seasons, and when I think about that question, I think a little bit about those seasons there we've been a little bit more successful and the seasons where we haven't. And I think from a best practices standpoint, we've had some pretty incredible off seasons leading into the seasons where we've been incredible while I've been here. We lost in the play-in my first year, and it gave us a really long off season, and it really motivated our guys to have a committed off season and really locked in. And then the next off season we won, and obviously shorter off season, guys are celebrating, and it was a whole turn of events. I think that consistency is one of the biggest things. We lift and train on a very consistent basis, and our off season training in terms of frequency is there. And as far as we'll call it sort of our injury prevention tactics, we stay on top of tendons. So from a best practices, overcoming isometrics on a regular basis, because tendons are something that we tend to deal with that are nagging for a number of athletes throughout the season and over the course of their careers. But in terms of best practices, I think consistency and, of course, talent is another thing that I think often isn't mentioned, like incredible talent on our team. And, it goes from the top down in terms of their habits and consistency of training and preparation. Each of our guys has a specific preparation that they do. It's somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes before every court session, whether it's a game day or a practice day. And we just stay on them on top of that. And we're lucky enough to have a lot of guys that are true professionals and stay on top of it themselves.
And in terms of consistency, how would you find using technology and data has kind of helped keep on top of that consistency?
Yeah, we use a lot of technology and data. We're fortunate. We have a great staff that leans into it. Anything from the software that we use from a programming standpoint, Bridge, and our force plates, keeps our athletes engaged, especially when they see the feedback immediately. The gamification sometimes even it's not so much it becomes more of a game at times, like during our off-season training, we'll be using load monitoring, and guys will come off the court and they'll want to know what their load was for the day, how much did they do, or how far away are they from their target. So that helps a lot in terms of engagement, motivation, and it also gives them a little bit of autonomy in their process, in that, like, hey, we know what the measurable outcome we're trying to go for is. Now you as the athlete can help us figure out how to get there.
Brilliant. And how important have you found the use in technology in making the gym more accessible and just generally making sure the athletes are just enjoying it a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think, I've been through a few different iterations of different programming. I programmed in Excel for a long time, like a lot of us had, on a piece of paper, and it wasn't too fun and fancy. And I've been through varying versions of different softwares, and we've kind of landed with Bridge. And I think that it's really easy to use. we have a lot of athletes that operate off of the iPad. Especially our younger athletes, the generation is so technology savvy that as soon as they pop it open and start playing with it, a lot of times they figure out things a lot quicker than I had figured them out. So that helps a lot. And then the autonomy in the sense of like when they're away from us, popping in helps a lot as well. And that goes with our other technologies, like, even our force plates, when an athlete can step on and, check in themselves, jump themselves, do it themselves, and take a look at some of those results on their own when I might be busy with another athlete. There's 3 or 4 of us, but we have a lot of guys in at the exact same time, and the ease of the technology is huge.
Yeah, and you touch on sort of the ease of the technology, which is great. What would you say is sort of, or if any, some of the biggest barriers in terms of implementing technology? And have you established any process over time to overcome this? Because I'm sure there's many organisations that they're thinking we need to start using more technology and data and software such as Bridge, but they might be a bit cautious in terms of how to implement that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see happen a lot, and I also experience myself, is trying to reverse engineer the problem that you're trying to solve, as opposed to hearing about a technology and trying to implement it. Like, what are the problems in your environment that you're trying to solve? What is the information that you're trying to gather? And then what is the technology that's going to help you do that? As opposed to, when I walked into this facility, it was its second year of our new arena, off of 3 titles. There was a lot of funding, a lot of equipment, and a lot of options. And ultimately we kind of had to decide, like, where are we going to put our time? Like, which pieces of equipment and technology are going to help us right now? And let's just use those to get the information that we already wanted. Let's not try to clutter the information that we're gathering with just anything we can get. And I think, force plates right now is a pretty hot topic where I think a lot of people are diving into a lot of different metrics. And I think there's probably only a few you really need to start with that can give you a pretty big bang for your buck.
So you yourself, in terms of the barrier, would you say that the process for you was quite simple and at ease?
Yeah. So from a barrier standpoint, I think number one, if it's too big of a leap to get started, I think that's typically one of the barriers, learning the technology. And then if the immediate the duration, how long it takes to get information or act off of it, are probably the 3 biggest barriers.
And Gaga and Matthew, I'd love to hear your views on sort of any biggest barriers that you've come across, or if you found it quite easy to transition into using technology for your your athletes.
I'll jump in. I think that there's, going off of what we already shared, I think it becomes easier when it's really something that is supporting the system that you're trying to implement. If we jump into looking for technologies and trying to build something around the technology, then it gets choppy, because you're really just trying to invent a system around the answers versus having a question and the technology providing the answers. And there's a difference between technology like the force plates, and that absolutely, I agree as well. There's some simple information we can get from it that answers questions and can help us monitor athletes or look for, check for progress and things like that. And technology like Bridge that works more for us, at least, like a leverage system that I can, individually use the tools within the system to provide detailed programming, a lot of times based on information I'm getting from force techs, from dynamometers, and other measurements, and create detailed programming that to the individual athletes versus having a more general team approach, and then be able to deliver that and provide coaching, provide good guidance on top of that in the weight room setting, for example. And as a result, we also end up getting some data back, some workload data back, for example. And at times we even use the Bridge as a place where we might store some of the data. Like I might use a velocity-based training device, for example, and instead of logging into another system and try to collect data in another system, I might just input that data into Bridge the same way the athlete would input the weights that they lifted for the session. And so ultimately for me, we're trying to do a lot of things, right? We have staff that are really enthusiastic and have studied a lot of things and want to do all these great things with the athletes and give them everything they need to support them and help them perform. So some of the technologies in one way works as this leverage, helps us be able to do more of these things in a detailed way with a high level of focus, and other things provide answers and help us make sure that the things that we're doing are either working or not, and gives us better direction.
Oh, great for that input. Thank you so much. And Matthew, I'm not sure if you sort of have had the same experience, or if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I guess like the thing what I found where the data has been really useful is when the players understand what that data means. You know, that end of the day, they're sports people, not sports scientists. So if you can help them understand that these metrics correlate to this part and this will help you with this part of your game, they just get so much more buy-in. You also have like different scopes of players as well. So some players want all the information in the world and they want to know every single detail. Some others are just like, how does this make me faster, or how does this make me more robust? So I guess just understanding your audience and just helping them understand then, well, you were doing this because of this. And then eventually that then just comes organic and they want to do it and it's not just sort of you banging the drum of dragging them into the gym.
Yeah. And Fadi, not sure if you could shed any light on any sort of tips or best practice that you would suggest for implementing technology and software such as, Bridge Athletic into organizations.
Yep. And Anthony hit on that, and that is, which is crucial, is that talent wins championships. And from a technology standpoint, where we see technology come into play is to help scale talent. And primarily from our standpoint, it's coaches, it's those guys who are on the call here today, trying to help them free up their time and do more with their athletes, do more of what they do best. So when implementing technologies, it's important to do two things, I would say. Number one, again, going off of what Anthony mentioned, understand the key problems, the key workflows that you're looking to improve, areas where technology can come in and assist. From a program design and delivery standpoint, that is our bread and butter. So Bridge Athletic has been very focused on the program design and delivery experience for coaches, and we've perfected it. We continue to invest in it. So if you're a coach who's considering or focused on program design and delivery, building programming, progressive programming, Bridge is a solution you should check out. If that's not an area you value and you're just building individual workout one at a time, which is typically not in an elite setting, perhaps you should look at other options. So it's important to first identify what is it key to your workflow that will help you be more efficient and more effective. And then ultimately, number two is you have to see what's out there, get a trial of the technologies that you're considering, get a chance to experience them. We truly believe that getting the right technology partner is important, not just from a software standpoint, from a team standpoint as well, to help you incorporate the strategies that you'd like to incorporate, because ultimately getting the wrong technology could be a cost as well, because it adds up more time to your workflows often that is perhaps not intuitive going into the decision. Hey, we want to get technology, but then it ends up sometimes costing more time and headache and pain.
But Gaga, in terms of obviously working in, if we look at football, a lot of different attributes and positions that athletes have. Obviously, Fadi just touched there on sort of technology should be used hopefully to help streamline and make everything a bit easier. So how important have you found it in terms of to help customize training programs for your players, and just, with all the varying roles that the athletes have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think to add to what Fadi said, like part of why we're using these technologies is to not mess up and get that talent off the field. It's probably our main job to keep them in there and at least not interfere with them being there. And then we'll start moving forward, trying to get them better. But that's being able to do that. Because the individualization is key, because we have very clear differences and needs in positions. Right? Like a sport like American football, it's very easy to see the difference, like, from a position to another. Sport like football, soccer, it's a little bit less easy to notice. So we need the technology to understand the difference of a wide player that might cover more ground, might reach more speeds higher velocities more often, and have a different energetic profile and biomechanical stress. We have to treat them differently than the other player that might have a completely different type of load. Sorry, not completely, but slightly different, but that slight difference is very meaningful, right? And with football is the difficulties that they are doing a very large volume of work. So any type of intervention that we implement will have a cost. They're already having a big cost from training, and so everything that we add is a big cost. So whatever we add needs to be precise. So the more data that we collect, the better that we organize the programming, the more that we're looking for being able to intervene and get a return with the least amount of stress added to the system, because recovery is one of our biggest points of focus, to be able to have athletes show up into a game and be ready to perform for an extended period of time. And there's a little bit of an increased need for that, because the sport itself is becoming more physical, from the standpoint that 10, 20 years ago, they just didn't run as much as they run now. For example, they simply have a higher work rate. We have better preparation systems, better training systems. They run more, but there's still, very relatively the same limit to the human body, and these athletes are pushing it to the limit. So I think that the technology coming in place to be able to help us understand, inform, and individualize the work that we provide them, it ends up being key. It's difficult to imagine working now without it.
And Matthew, actually on this topic, because working at 290 Performance, obviously you have regular access to athletes across multiple elite sports and athletes in a variety of different roles as well. So how do you find there's much difference in the approach that you take?
I guess like the first thing we would look at is, what's the problem or the issue that the player is having. So it's maybe not so much always like that it's the different sports. It's like obviously within sport, people have got different issues, and then across sports they have different issues. So I guess it's kind of like what is the needs analysis and what is the issue that they're having. Normally when they come to somebody external, it's because they're having an issue with something that they're doing, and then trying to understand and learn what's the athlete's story, and what do they want. So yeah, from that perspective, there is some different approaches to obviously you will take based on what the sporting need is, but the majority of the time is what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and go from there.
Yeah. And obviously I know, Anthony, your season's so busy, all the seasons, Gaga, is the athletes are put through a lot during the busy season. So from a wider performance perspective, how have you found investing in technology has supported athlete performance from like a medical and rehabilitation standpoint? Because I know also, Gaga, you've just touched on making sure that the athletes are getting rest, and obviously medical and rehabilitation is so important, especially during that busy season. So I'd love to hear all of your points on that one.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a busy season, and so there's a couple different tiers, or a few. First and foremost, like load management in terms of kind of, keeping our high days high and our lower off days low, or actually completely off. So from a a training load standpoint and monitoring that, like that's one of the first ways that we do that. We have a lot of guys that love the game and they just love to get on the court, and they have the ability to get too excited and do too much on the day before a game or leading into like a really dense period of time. And we've had true trial and error. Athletes realize like what we've told them may actually have some truth. You know, you can't go hard every single day. On the flip side of that, using our force plates and analysis, we're able to pick up some very minute and distinct changes and asymmetry and outputs that would give us a little bit of indication that they're a bit more fatigued or potentially dealing with something on the left side or right side by way of favoring one side or avoiding the other, which then allows our medical side to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that. In addition, we have all of this data from the game, and the game is also getting really, really fast. And we're able to see which of our guys are keeping up and which ones aren't, and we're able to better strategize what to do between games using all of that technology.
And Gaga, for you as well?
Yeah, I'll add to that. Same processes, right? Like we I think first we're very early on, and part of what makes preseason busy is that we try to get a real good understanding of the athlete. And some of the athletes we've had for already a year or multiple years. For Anthony, for example, some of the athletes I feel like he probably knows really well what bugs them and what doesn't. We try to develop that, and then try to. Some of it is data, some of it is through the experience and through monitoring what they have been doing, and monitoring the loads and doing those types of assessments. We call them readiness assessments, right? Like looking if they're ready to perform again, are they ready to go into the next practice, go into the next game, and trying to pick out flags, little red flags that are indicating that maybe something's starting to turn in a direction where they need some rest or they need some sort of other intervention. And we've gotten to a point where we've tried to create a flag system where if we use the force plates, for example, for a certain type of assessment to see if there's a change in their jump strategy, for example, or the force output, that's a flag. They played more. They had an output from the game that they just played that is higher than the regular output. That can be a flag, right? Because they likely would need some additional recovery from that. If we see an asymmetry, we receive something in their wellness survey that they might fill out just to let us know how they're feeling and separate things. Basically, we try to create a system where one flag might be something. Is usually something that's just a conversation. A lot of times clears it out. Like they didn't jump as high. So yeah, didn't feel ready to go. Now I'm fine. 5-6 flags now is something where maybe that the athlete doesn't even know but they need some rest, and we need to intervene. And a lot of times when we get to that point, the intervention is not just a day of rest or a little bit less here. They're at a systemic point now where we're gonna need a couple of weeks to switch them, to change what they're doing and get them back into a better state. So I think these monitoring tools are essential for the health of the athlete. And then on top of that, there's going to be the more medical side of things, of treatments and recovery systems and strategies that ultimately make up a relatively small percent of their recovery ability, right? Or over the sleep, hydration, nutrition, things that are the real key. But in an elite setting, we're going to use it and try to just push the needle a little bit more.
And Fadi, how do you find Bridge is sort of helping coaches, as Gaga just said, sort of monitor rehabilitation a little better, especially during those busy seasons?
Yeah. Bridge has been focused quite a bit on the performance aspect. I hit earlier on program design and delivery, and we've come a long way over the last few years to try and help Garga and other coaches develop a more holistic view on the performance side of the house. So whether it is incorporating those daily readiness logs or daily wellness logs to be able to capture simple information from the athlete, or being able to impact how not only they train, but also how they learn and how you're coaching them and giving them a better idea of the why. Why is it important to either push hard or rest as well? Because ultimately, what Garga, Anthony, and Matt have in common is they know what they're trying to do and build with the athletes. They have that relationship with the athlete. They're just trying to get them to comply with when to push hard or, in a sense, rest. So going back to your point earlier, Chris, in terms of like how do we keep teams healthy and performant. So from our standpoint, again, making that information from a performance standpoint available to the practitioner, to the coaches is important to. And then number two, it always also comes down to making the technology and the software look nice, look pretty. So when the athlete experience, and I think Anthony, you hit on that earlier, when the athlete experience looks sleek and nice, those young athletes are a lot more likely to comply with it, to be, check off information in the app and provide info back to the performance staff, important information and actionable insights. So at times, innovation is just making things look more intuitive and cleaner from an athlete standpoint, and it ultimately makes our community's job, our coach's job, more effective too.
And obviously that probably helps with the whole just collaboration of teams. Garga, as head of performance and managing a team yourself, how do you ensure the whole performance and medical staff are working collaboratively to get the best out of their athletes?
That's a good segue, because we're talking about Bridge is one of our first things coming in and getting prepared to implement our systems. I started with the team just beginning of last year. It was an entire new staff. There was very few people in the organization who remained when this new group came in, not just from a performance standpoint. It was a new technical staff, it was new administration, new performance medical staff. And the Bridge became a helpful tool for us to be able to have athletes in a central place where all of our interventions that are related to the work that we do in the weight room and related to interventions that we're applying to them to be in one place, for us to be able to develop terminologies and language that we speak across the board. So even from to the point of exercise nomenclature, having a system of how we name exercises, so that if I have a medical staff who may be in the weight room with an athlete, they put an exercise in, I should be able to read that exercise, even if I don't necessarily know what it is, and understand what we're trying to achieve there, right? What type of movement, what type of load, so that created this. At least it didn't create, but it helped seamlessly integrate our medical and performance teams, which is one of I think a very key important thing to pursue when working with a sports organization, because there's so much crossover between the work that the medical team and the performance team will do, and really in general we want to do it together. So that gave us a central platform where the delivery of these things will happen, and that can allow for communication as well. There are communication systems within Bridge that we use to communicate between staff and to make sure that when even as something as simple as making a change to an exercise based on a little bit of pain or discomfort, or even a preference from the athlete, when that happens from any end, the other people involved, the other staff involved will have that information. And so we all stay informed, can communicate with the athletes better, and the athletes can communicate with us better. So some of these tools help manage the big picture of having a whole team that can work together and implement things without individual silos that don't necessarily collaborate.
I'm sure that collaboration, hopefully for all of you, has hopefully made more of a positive team culture behind the scenes as well. Because, as you say, you're all able to collaborate a little bit more. And I know Fadi just touched on also making the software, look presentable and nice for the athletes to go onto. And I just, Anthony, you were sort of nodding your head there when Fadi mentioned that. So have you found that's really been useful?
Yeah, absolutely. We've gone through varying versions, like I kind of mentioned, of software, and in our current iteration with Bridge, like the sleekness and the ease. One of the things I share with a lot of technology companies, because I was going through this in my head right now, and we probably have at least 10 different pieces of tech in our weight room. And the other thing is just bugs, right? Like, it's sleekness and it's ease, but it's also how often does an athlete have a negative experience with a bug? They click something and it doesn't work, and how quickly is that bug resolved? I have some technologies that I have to explain to them, like, every time our athlete uses this tech and they experience one little bug, these athletes, it's really hard to get them to come back to it. They experienced two. It's really tough. So the sleekness helps, the ease, and then also just like not having any negative experiences with that tech.
And for all three of you, have you found that collaboration and the ease of using that technology to bring not just the players, but just the whole team in your organization together, have you found it more of a positive team culture behind the scenes? Anthony, do you want to go first?
Yeah, we for sure have. Leaderboards is like a really simple example. Just athletes being able to just kind of see, and we actually don't innately need leaderboards. Athletes will just, once they have the immediate feedback of a jump, how high it was, what their RSI mod was, they can just quickly we can say like, hey, that's not that great. And another player would be like, yeah, that's not that great. And it immediately spurs this level of competition against others, themselves. Yeah.
And Gaga, in your experience, has it created more of a positive culture behind the scenes?
Yeah, I think, Anthony touched earlier on too, the autonomy, like there's a level of autonomy that he allows, right? Like even from the standpoint of the athlete, maybe just sometimes they get coached all the time. They get told what to do a lot, and sometimes going and getting a training session where you're not being told all the time, and maybe have more autonomy, leading yourself, and having the ability to communicate within the system a change, even just looking at an exercise and not liking it. And this happens to all of us. If I don't like an exercise, I might just not really put the effort I want to put into it. So I would much rather the athlete look at it and be like, I don't like this. Can we change it and find something else that achieves the same purpose? And Bridge actually gives quite a few alternatives to that, or like solutions to that problem, like from being able to have alternative exercises already built into that program, so they can just click and look at some other options and select it. Or sometimes it's just a comment on the exercise that we all receive right away that can help spur us into action. So that's a nice tool to have, to give athletes some space, sometimes autonomy, and then they keep the effort, keep the motivation high for them to do the things that they need to do.
Matthew, in your experience, has it been sort of, do you sort of agree with what's been discussed here in terms of helping it be a more positive team culture behind the scenes?
Yeah, for sure. I think for where our sort of situations may be a little bit more unique, we work with, obviously because we're an external provider, we then work with the clubs and then maybe an external physio. So where Bridge makes things really easy to share with the staff at the football clubs. You can invite people in as a coach for an individual player. If we're working with a physio as well, or a nutritionist, then we can invite them in as well, which is sort of they don't see everybody else's, they just see this player, which makes things really easy for sort of the autonomy and the relationship between everybody. Sort of I guess everybody, in all sports now, I'm sure you guys have come across this as well, that players work with people externally, and I've been on both sides of the coin, now working externally and also having worked at a club. Transparency with what the players are doing is so important, because otherwise we just, you end up doing your thing and then the guys externally end up doing theirs, and the players just get absolutely hammered. So from that perspective, it's made things so easy for the staff just to click on the app, see what the program is for the player. And also because we're not there every day, sometimes the staff who are working with the player from day to day need to make a really quick decision based off training. Training has been way harder than they thought because the manager has decided that. So we won't see that we won't be able to react to that straight away because we're not there. Whereas then the staff can make comments, they can change things and say, okay, well, we only did this, this, and this, and we see it really quickly. So it makes the transition and the comms between everybody really simple.
Yeah, and the vice versa of that too. Like internally, we'll sign a guy or multiple players during the off season, leading into preseason, and the ability to share the team program with the coach that's working with that athlete and saying like, hey, this is what our guys that are in town right now are doing. Like this is the expectation for 4 weeks from now from a conditioning standpoint and some of the evaluations that we're going to be doing, like to get prepared. One other thing it just hit really hard is you're talking about autonomy, Garga, is we see these guys so frequently. I have a player right now that's in a return to play process, and he'll be with me 9 out of 10 days. And sometimes he walks in and and I can tell it's like, I just don't want to talk to you today. Right? Like, I just want to pick up the app. I want to do the work. I want to get better, but I don't need you to walk me through everything. And technologies that allow an athlete, they have the exercise name, the video, the sets, the reps. If I've programmed appropriately, they can go through it themselves. Now I can coach, like if something looks really, really bad, right? Or I need to switch something, we can do that. But giving the athlete the autonomy to just like have their own space, but still get their work done, whether it's during the off season on a trip or in season when they're just having a day, is extremely, extremely useful.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And Matthew, actually staying on this point, because working at 292 Performance, obviously you work with athletes on a more individualized approach, because I know you do a lot of bespoke support programs. And how do you find that athletes respond to the use of data-driven methods in understanding their own performance in the long run? And kind of touching on what Anthony just said there as well, just gives them maybe what they feel a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, I guess that the sort of day and age now in all sport is so data driven, not just from a performance like a S&C or medical perspective. Especially in football now, everything is measured through XG, etc. So players are so invested in data, and not just invested for their own. It can help with transfers. It can help with getting signed by different clubs. Agents are even now asking us for data. So we're not just having to explain it to players, we're trying to explain information to agents and to clubs. So yeah, it's really, really important. So what we have our 292 profiling system, which is, it's very specific to the population that we work in, and then we make it really simple for players to understand. So we compare them with the population of elite football players, so they know where they are relative to sort of the best players in the world. And then also it makes it really easy for us to say, well, you're doing this because we need to affect this metric, or we're trying to change here. And we'll color code things that way. So to make it really simple for the players to understand. And then, so when we'll do our profiling, we'll either speak to the players and the agents or whoever needs to see it around. We'll either send them a video or we'll just explain it over the phone. So it just makes things really, really clear. So we also then work with companies like Speedworks for the acceleration and change direction profile. So it's a really sort of holistic profile of the athletes, and what they need. So then we'll always share that with the clubs as well. So everybody's across what our profiling system is and what the players need. So it just keeps everybody involved and everyone engaged. I think the most important thing, in my opinion, for the data-driven side of stuff is it creates intent. Nobody wants to be the worst. And if you're working in a team environment, as soon as you stick the numbers up on the wall of who's got the highest jump, you can bet all the money in the world that everyone's going to be going for it in the next session because no one wants to be the worst. So from that perspective, it creates things, and it creates a better training environment for everybody as well.
I was wondering if a lot of you was going to say that it's helped create a bit more competition. Have you just touched there, Matt, on the leadership board, etc.? Have you all found that it's created a bit more of a competitiveness in the athletes?
Yeah, for sure. Someone mentioned earlier, I think Anthony might have been you around, it makes it like a little bit more of a game, a bit more fun. So like at Southampton, we would say like, oh, you don't want to be in the relegation zone, you want to be in the top four. You know, you want to be challenging for Europe. And then, you know, it got to a point where some of the guys, they don't even want to go on the platform because they know they're rubbish. So they'll be like shirking away and everyone's clapping them in. And, you know, it makes it a little bit more fun and engaging. And also from a sort of more of a scientific perspective, because their intent is so high, then you're getting a true measure of what their sort of jump strategies are as well. They're not trying to copy other people. They're just trying to jump as hard as possible. So like, it's kind of like it's a double win. You get a really pure metric from the player, and you're also getting some competitive fun sort of, in the gym session.
Brilliant. And Matthew, just if, you know, with using Bridge and Output in your own experience, how have you found these systems have just helped you generally in your day-to-day role working with these athletes?
So, for example, Output can be really, really useful so something that I've used it quite regularly with is so in season when players are tired and you've got like really congested periods of matches, we'll base that off so the velocity in their exercises. So you can go as heavy as possible as long as the bar speed is X, or you can make it competitive as, you know, everyone's going to go this way and we'll see who can produce the most force. So like the biggest difference for me when going from rugby to football is football players do not care about the weight on the bar. That's irrelevant to them. You know, they're not going to come in and go, I did 150 kilos. You know, the next football player is going to be like, doesn't mean nothing to me. Whereas in rugby, you know, if one player sees somebody doing a weight, they want to then do 5 kilos more just because it's like a badge of honor. So, but when it comes to with football, when it comes to speed, everybody wants to be the most powerful and the fastest. So using things like Output was a game changer for me in terms of football. And then obviously using Bridge just makes things super, super simple. You know, we would have 4 or 5 iPads in the gym. The players can just go and click through. And like I said earlier, especially now working independently, it just makes things really easy for me to just give things to the players. And there's also like lots of different ways that you can do it. Maybe in some of the other softwares are very maybe rigid in terms of this is the way that you have to write a program. So for example, now if a training week for a player has changed because the new manager's come in and things have just kind of completely gone sort of crazy, I can send it as a playlist opposed to you need to do this on this day. I can speak to the coaches at the club and say, all right, well, if the training session is really hard, then this is a small session. If the training session is really easy, he can do this session. And it just gives you different ways and sort of different tools to make things easier and more effective.
And Fadi, just interested to hear, because I know sort of for a lot of coaches, things are probably feel like they're always changing. You know, the role of sports and conditioning coach in elite sports is constantly changing. So how do you view the future of Bridge in terms of helping the likes of Matt, Gaga and Anthony just with their day-to-day roles?
Yep. And we've hit on how much on a few different topics today: individualizing training, analyzing data, collaborating across different departments, showing how these guys' role is ever evolving. And from our standpoint, we have to constantly improve and keep up with the evolution. We hit on a few topics around flexibility, which is tremendously important. I know, Garga, you spoke to the ability to program exercise alternatives to athletes, or being able to perform edits on the fly on the weight room floor with your athletes. Matt hit on the ability to assign playlists versus being stuck on a calendar. Otherwise, you're just going to be moving and shuffling workouts and spending more time doing that than coaching. And all of these improvements and updates came through conversations with coaches, trying to deepen our understanding of their day-to-day workflows. Where are they spending more time than they should in spreadsheets or in our technologies, and trying to streamline the process. They're trying to improve our tool, trying to allow them to implement more flexibility in terms of their strategies. So typically, you know, some folks think that every single feature needs to be a game changer, and that is not true. You just have to listen to what coaches, and because we always put coaches first, what are the key challenges they're facing in their day-to-day, and be willing to adapt your product roadmap to their feedback and make, at times, simple, small improvements, which have a great impact in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of their athletes and teams.
And Fadi, what is the common feedback that you receive from coaches in terms of using Bridge as a software? And if you had to pinpoint one USP for Bridge, what would you say it is?
Well, we spoke a lot about the software today, but our team is always gets a lot of credit from our community and coaches. I think it's always fun to hear that the product works, but ultimately the team is the face of the product. So incredibly fortunate to work with a fantastic team. In terms of the product itself, we've stayed very true to our core, which is program design and delivery from the get-go, and we've constantly improved the experience. Every single update that we do has to have an upgrade to program design and delivery. So every month we're pushing the boundary, and some are more innovative capabilities. For example, we just updated our adaptive conditioning prescriptions, similar to the adaptive weight prescription. Those are the innovative features that we constantly try to push the boundary of the industry with, but we're constantly making improvements to the fundamentals and the basics. And I believe that our approach has been different from other folks in the space who have been trying to do a little bit of too much and spreading a mile wide and not going as deep as they should. And I believe that is our strength, and it's been incredibly well received by coaches who have experienced Bridge. In terms of the feedback, clearly it depends. I think that people who have tried technology in the past and then are trying Bridge absolutely love Bridge. They tend to have struggled with technologies in the past and then now are excited about Bridge people. And then you have certain folks who are still in spreadsheets, and those guys tend to rely on folks like Anthony, Matt, and Garga to hear about their journeys, their experiences, to understand why technology can drive impact for them and for their teams. And then we've also seen a lot of positive feedback from folks who went from spreadsheets straight into Bridge as well.
That's great. So in terms of how you found the growth of the company since sort of its inception, and with the ever evolving demand in elite sports, what would you say yours has been?
Yeah. From the get-go, we wanted to build a best-in-class product for the leaders of the industry. So we started building Bridge Athletic for within the US, because that's where we're based, for professional sports teams and NCAA programs. Over the last few years, we started growing more globally into Europe, Australia, Asia, and we've seen tremendous growth, not only in sports, but also a massive shout out to tactical. So we're very proud of our tactical community and the growth we've seen there. And we're also seeing, with the rise of strength training in the private world, so not necessarily elite, but we're seeing a lot of adoption of strength training in private, and we're seeing a lot of practitioners valuing program design and delivery with private training and independent trainers. So it's been a phenomenal few years for us in terms of growth across that entire perform better category, whether you're in professional sports, collegiate sports, tactical, or private. If you're looking to build periodized programming, we're seeing a lot of these folks come to use Bridge.
It sounds like you're doing a wonderful job. So well done. Okay, it was wonderful to hear from all four of our speakers. So thank you so much to Fadi, Anthony, Garga, and Matthew for sharing how you are finding using data, technology to help you in your day-to-day roles and just your organisations in general. It's been really insightful.